everyone. Welcome back. Episode 7. Boy, we're really
Something like that.
getting up there, aren't we?
I can't count.
It's getting to the as a bodybuilder, I get lost at about 2 or 3. But yeah, we're getting up there, which is good. Yeah. How has your week been so far, mate?
It's been really fucking good, mate. It's been really fucking good. My sleep's been a bit shit last week. I don't know what the fuck.
Been snoring.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah, I didn't talk about this on the pod. I kept.
Here we go.
Which is not ideal. But yeah, I seemed to be doing all right today. I had a really productive upper. Absolutely everything fucking flew, which is good. I made some adjustments to my food, layering in some more complex shit. And I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's the most detailed my food's been in a very, very long time, rather than just being like chicken, rice, consumed many, many times. It's a bit more put together, and there's a bit more thought process into it. So I'm literally looking forward to every meal because I'm like, oh, when I eat this meal, this fucking nerdy shit's going to happen in my body. But yeah, like things are fucking good. We're doing well. I've actually had minimal caffeine today because I've just been thriving off of vibes. So yeah, mate, what about yourself?
I'm in a similar boat, mate. I've had minimal caffeine as well. Just good time. Food is up. I'm like, I gained like almost a kilo, no, over 1.5 kilos in 4 days, which is nuts. Obviously, it's not all going to be fat. It's going to be a lot of glycogen. Now that I'm back to training properly, not being fucking just gay about it, to be honest. Like, for anyone that's been following me knows that I did like some sort of power building, like emo split basically for like 2 months. Ended in an injury, as to be expected, which is so ironic. Now that injury is pretty much 95% done. So I did my lower back deadlifting. Yeah, it's 95% healed, which is really good. Still going to do rehab for another probably 2 to 3 weeks, just as a precaution. Because of, collagen fibers, and it takes more time in a remodeling phase. If you're in the academy, you'll know I did a lecture on this. But yeah, so food is up. Really, really fucking hungry. I'm not gonna lie. Considering the amount of protein I'm eating, I'm closing on like 300 grams at the moment, which is a bit fucked. Obviously, I need to drop that down, but hunger is still in like a ridiculous place. Training performance is through the roof. Like I'm taking the same load that I was like a week or 2 weeks ago, but like pausing it.
Yeah.
Like, which is ridiculous. Like, for anyone that trains knows how much of a progression, like if you're taking the same load that you would do for a top set and then pausing every single rep, it is fucked. So like I've made that adjustment. Certain exercises I have dropped a little bit of weight, obviously, specifically presses. But yeah, just generally speaking, just really in a good place. Like I'm now settling into the bulk. I feel heavy. I look heavy. Definitely have put in a little bit of body fat. But like composition is still holding relatively well. Still got somewhat of a V-taper.
Composition's fucking good, Mr. Humble.
Yeah, it's the post blues of after a prep. You're gonna look back at the photos, you can be like, holy shit! Like striations, veins, fucking like it's inevitable, So like the deeper you get into bulk, the more you want to cut. And like, I'm already at that stage where I'm like, Jack, get me in a prep, please. Like it's just so funny because I remember back when I was in prep. And the last thing I wanted to was to continue it. I was like, Jack, please just end this. Like, this is fucked. I hate myself. I hate everything. It's just like, prep is like such a beautifully disgusting thing. It's like, when you're in it, you hate everything and everyone. But when you're not in it, you just want to go again. And like, as bodybuilders, we're so analytical. We're like, oh, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do this better. This went really shit last time, so we're not going to do that. Your first prep will always be your worst prep. Yeah. Every single prep after that, if you've done it correctly, you will take all the statistics and all the data from the previous prep, everything that went wrong, everything that went well, and then you'll reapply it to your future preps. Things like peaking, for example. At peak, there's general guidelines, what everyone should be peaking between, but ultimately a peak should be tailored towards you. Your first peak will be, following guidelines because we don't know, how much, carbs you need to take to fill you up before you spill, you know, hydration, salt intake, etc. I give an example for myself, like I can cut on a relatively higher amount of calories. So like once I got to 1.6K and jacked up my cardio to 25 minutes, that was me done. Like I was finished. I could not do it anymore. And that's the week when I went hypo, when you upped my cardio to 25 minutes. That was fucking but it's like, you know, there's certain people who could do less cardio, and there's certain people who could do more cardio and they still need that additional cardio, or, you know, manipulate calories. So it's like it's completely dependent on the person, and you need to, you know, do it at least once, I'd say, before you actually step on stage. You know, don't make your first prep be the prep that you step on stage, because so much shit can go wrong, you know, and you need to know what to manipulate and how to manipulate it in order to have a successful prep. You know, you have to do at least a mock prep, let's say.
Yeah. A mock prep and a mock peak, because you just don't know. The thing about dieting is it taxes so much shit, like your brain, your body, your social life, your energy, like your general mood, impulse control. Like the reason that prep purchases exist is because, like, when you've got, like, your food is just so fucking mundane and boring, you have to derive dopamine from somewhere, and it comes from buying shit, it comes from doing shit. I remember, like, fighting the like, just I get the weirdest cravings and urges whenever I'm really lean, like, because you've not got much scope, you can kind of move within. You kind of like I remember just being like obsessed with that's when I bought my PS5. I was obsessed with that. I was like looking at cars and shit. I was like fucking I remember obsessing about, like, I think that was when the Oreo Coke came out as well. Maybe it was a little bit, maybe that was after, I can't remember. But, like, I was obsessed.
What?
Yeah, man, that was weird. But, like, I was obsessing with it, obsessing with soft drinks. And, like, if I was out and about and I saw a soft drink, or I saw, like, a decaf coffee, I'd go and, like, buy it immediately, even if I didn't want it or need it. Or, like, if I'm going to, like, the amount of times that I would be like, I'm bored, I'm just gonna go to Tesco and buy fucking cherry tomatoes and, like, a soft drink, and just, like, scram that and pull back on my fucking carbs or whatever. Like, yeah, crazy, man, crazy, like, stupid shit. But, like, when you I feel like to kind of get away with that psychologically, of just, like, everything being so the same, being so beaten up, you have to, like, embrace. Like, I wouldn't get upset about myself spending, like, fucking 25 quid a week on, like, soft drinks, or like 30 quid, 40 quid a week on soft drinks. So that it is what it is, to allow me to do everything else that I need to do. Like, it's not hurting anyone, it's fine, it's not going to take away from my fucking diet, so sod it. But yeah, you need to know how you respond to dieting by getting there, and you never know what you're going to encounter until you get there. And the thing is, the more you expose yourself to it, the easier it gets. The last diet I did, the pre-prep, was so fucking easy, like, because I knew exactly what to expect. Like, when you just know what you're getting yourself in for and you're at peace with it, it's just fine. Like, it really is just fine. I'll be like, I'm tired, I'm hungry, okay, cool. Like, it really wasn't as horrible as, like, the first few times I dieted. I remember the first time I properly dieted was through uni. It was fucking horrible. I was absolutely miserable. But now reaching that level of body fat or even lower is, like, piss easy.
Yeah, like every single diet you have the ability to get leaner because you've already charted that territory. Like for me, I never really got like striations. I had like the glimpse of striations, but like to me, I think I had more in me. But like there was just no benefit for a photo shoot to get me striated.
Yeah.
Like it just, like, considering how lean I was, how far away we were from the shoot, I would have been like in the hole for a prolonged amount of time. And like, you got to understand, you know, I'm at uni, I had exams, you know, dissertation, stuff like that. So it's like my general well-being was also an important factor. You know, I feel like when I step on stage, I now know that I will be striated because I know what it takes, and I know it takes more than what I put 100%. I need to give 110% in order to get those quad striations or the tricep striations or fucking glute striations, you know. And dieting is such a difficult thing to do. Like, your body's literally starving, like, for months, for months, like, and you have to maintain training performance as well, like if and progress, and your body's like, I'm dying, I don't need this muscle, I want to get rid of it. So you like your total effective volume effectively goes up on a cut because your body doesn't want to hold on to that muscle.
Yep.
Because you're losing, you're gonna die basically. Your body thinks you're gonna die. So, to maintain training performance and to even progress and to be in a deficit for that amount of time, there's a reason people don't prep every single year. Even enhanced bodybuilders, they sometimes take a season out or even 2 seasons to grow, because if you do a full complete prep, that's taken out months, 3, 4, sometimes in 5 months, depending on how long your season you have competing, of a 12-month potential bulk. That's kind of in the phase I am in right now. It's like I really, 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 really fucking want to get on stage, and like all of my close mates are like, I don't know why you haven't got on stage yet, and I'm like, do you know what? True, but I know I want to bring my best package to the juniors, like first timers. Like I want everyone to go, what the fuck is that?
Yeah,
and I've still got, give or take, another 2 years. So it's just like fighting that urge now. Like I could, but could I get more out of it? It's like, am I being greedy? But at the same time, it's a difficult one, because I like a lot of people I know are competing this year. So I've never actually been to a bodybuilding show. I don't know what it looks like. So I'd like to go to a show first just to see what the fuck's going on. Like get a glimpse of the competitors on stage, look at the judges, just see what it's like. Because obviously I've watched shows online, but I feel like it's not the same. I want to be a spectator in order to get into like the mindset of what it's like to be on stage then.
I think one of the harder, there's a couple of things I want to touch on that you said. I think one thing is for like people who are more advanced or more like into training, like bodybuilders listening to this, the difficulty with you guys is phase envy, of like holding you in a phase, because when an off season's been really productive and you reach the back end, you're going to want to stay in it, and kind of being like, hey, no, it's time for us to tidy up, or it's time for this. It's kind of hard to let go. And often like you see the kind of the inverse, where it's like you put someone through a prep and they're like, that was great. Or they fucking struggle or whatever. And then they get to the back end, they stay lean, they get a bit of body fat on, and then they want to diet again. And like often that's where you have to kind of like delay your own gratification a little bit. And you have to get yourself to a point where like, if you're antsy for the next phase, that's good, but it still doesn't mean that you should go ahead and do that next phase, if that makes sense. It's still important to like spend your time, because otherwise you can quite easily get in a loop of like forever off season or forever prep or whatever, right? And you're just never really gonna like make significant changes. But it's good to have like drive. I think most people have like drive to prep, and they just kind of go through the off season as like a precursor to prep. But again, that's what we have to do to make those changes. But I mean, ultimately, like dieting is a lot more rewarding than gaining. Gaining is just very samey and fine or whatever. And that's where people struggle, I think, is making gaining or off seasons as kind of enjoyable as possible. And another thing I want to touch on there that you said was like volume during a diet. I think so many people cock up diets because they don't run volume to an adequate degree. They run volume lower, or they see that they see lift stalling, they see fatigue, or what they perceive as fatigue building, and their instinct is to pull sets. And I think when you're in a gaining phase, sure, right? But when you're in a diet phase, just because the lift has stalled doesn't mean that you pull volume. It might mean that you increase volume, but often it means looking at other things. And that's where really good fucking programming comes in. Because good fucking programming, managing resistance profiles, managing recovery, creating effective stimulus without over trashing someone, basically the SFR of what you're using, is really fucking important. I think people ignore that, and instead they just kind of run it like an off season, but then give them not enough sets, and then they just fucking die, and it's just not effective at all. Or they stop looking at form footage and how effective those sets are actually being performed. So yeah, like you said, I think people fuck up diets all the time, and it's really not that hard to program a good diet. It just requires you to not just pull away volume as soon as you're like, oh, training's fucked, deload, devolume, or less volume, whatever, because it's not that simple.
I think, like, in the metric that you use, what's successful for a bulk and for a cut is fundamentally different. When you're cutting, it's visual changes. When you're bulking, you're chasing progressions in the gym, like numbers.
Yeah.
So that change in what you view as a successful, bulk or a cut or a successful phase, that's what really gets people. So it's like you're in a cut for, let's say, 3-4 months. You're used to chasing visuals, the way you look every single week. You're taking check-ins. You're like, I look better and better and better. You go into a gaining phase, your mind is still kind of telling you, okay, I'm still chasing visuals. And yeah, in the beginning part of a gaining phase after a cut, you might look a little bit fuller, and you've maintained that leanness because it takes a significant amount of time to put on body fat. So you still look pretty fucking mint. But like after a couple of weeks, what I noticed, I was like, okay, I can see myself getting the body fat. I can see myself losing definition, veins. I'm getting a much better pump, and I look bigger, but I don't look as good. And it's like that change of, okay, now we're not chasing, visuals are still important to chase, and progressions are still important to chase in each respective phase, but it's not the priority, And like, that's when shit really hit the fan for me. In this bulk, I was like, okay, we're now chasing progressions. Like, not fucking 20 kilos in a session, like what I was doing before, like powerlifting style. That's not building muscle. I'm now like, I got excited today because I put 2.5 kilo on each side. I was like, yes, this is fucking body. I was like, I'm max reps with a 2.5 on each side. Yes, I am happy. And like, that's what bodybuilding is. It's like tiny progressions, but progressions nonetheless every single week. That's what builds muscle. And that's what gets me excited now. And I feel like that's the mindset that you should have going into your gaining phase, is these micro progressions, form, execution, weight, obviously, time under tension, all of these metrics that we can use. I think there's like certain, standardizations that we need to adopt for form, for safety purposes, but obviously to stimulate hypertrophy. So like things like time and attention, pausing in the lengthened or even a micro pause, because the change of direction in the rep is the most important part. Right? I think that's very fucking neglected. Like, so many people milk the idea of like, yeah, you got to slow down the eccentric, bro. Like, you do, but like, that's nowhere near as important. If you do a really slow eccentric, but then at the bottom I see fucking bouncing that shit, that's not a good rep to me. The change in direction is the single most important part of the rep, period. But obviously you got, execution, time under the tempo. Another thing that's really heavily overlooked is people are scared to have a forceful contraction. Like, I'll see people like 1-2 reps into a set and they're like, the contraction phase is really slow. I'm like, why? The eccentric it can be slow, yeah, cool, but the concentric should be powerful, should be forceful. That's why you pause in the stretch, because it's a safe position to start from to force a contraction. If you're bouncing out of it, right, it makes sense if you're going to bounce out of it, because you're not tensing your muscle properly in that last, like, let's say 2 degrees. And then if you bounce and then contract really quickly, that's how you fucking rip a pec. But if you pause in the contraction and then press really hard, you're not going to pop shit because the muscle's contracted the entire time. So this is why that change in direction is so important, not just from a hypertrophy perspective, but to be safe. Which is, what I preach all the fucking time. That's why I'm here, is to make sure that everyone's being safe, because that's going to net you more gains in the long run. And longevity, I've said this so many times now, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but longevity is the most important factor for muscle growth. How long you can do it for, because there's a reason people bodybuild for decades, for years on years on years. A good example of this is Reese. Reese, the big bodybuilder. His knees are fucked. He's really big bloke, I'll give him that, but his knees are fucked. And I saw his post today where he was saying like he's usually confident going into into prep and then stepping on stage, etc. But he's not been able to bring his legs up this off season because his knees have been fucked. And then I'll see him doing like a set and he's like flinging about like fucking, I don't know, 25 plates on a leg press. I'm like, big man, relax. Like, I don't exactly know what was going on with his knees, but I'm pretty sure it's something ligamentous, and he's had surgery on it. if that's the case, there are other ways to go around it. Don't fucking force it, because now you're being put in a position where your joints are holding you back from competing and from reaching your full potential.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that you can do about it. Like what, you're gonna have another surgery? Like fucking hell. And that's to say, through his bodybuilding career, cool. But what about after? What about when you get to 40, 50, 60? You've already had one surgery. What, you're gonna have five? Like fucking, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the key thing about like bodybuilding or bodybuilding like reps in general is, I don't know, people just get very like dogmatic about reps. It's very weird. Absolutely agree on the tempo point, like where people, I see it all the time on like a pendulum squat or a hack squat. People start off really slow, like they really, really, really slow at the start and then just absolutely bounce out the bottom. It's like, I'd almost rather you didn't do that. I would rather you did the opposite. The thing is, like, often I say to people, like, slow down into the full stretch. Absolutely don't be afraid of a forceful contraction. The only time that you would change that is the slower you move through a contraction, at the point where you are slowest is where you're experiencing pretty much maximal force. So the harder it is, the slower you move, the harder it is, right? So if you did a dumbbell lateral raise and your shoulders could take it, if you went really slow on the concentric up to about halfway and then rapidly moved up, you could make it a bit less of a short range exercise, a bit more of a mid range. There's very few applications where I'd actually practically use that, but it's still good to be aware of. But a forceful contraction is good. You need to be, particularly in a stable environment, like I always say to people, like on the adductor or like on a T-bar row or like a seated machine row, like if you have a chest pad bracing you and it's some kind of row variation, like you have the ability to produce force. So go and produce force. You're going to be able to get more reps. You're going to be able to expose yourself to mechanical tension. Do that, still control the negative, and you're going to see a hell of a lot of growth, particularly if the profile on that piece is fantastic. Like if you've got a prime row you've set up, or strive, you've set up the resistance profile perfect how you want it, yeah, just go and have a forceful contraction, you'll be fine. Yeah, people get really dogmatic views about training, and I think even within like controlling the eccentric, I see people like, oh, it has to be a certain length of time. Not really. The general rule that I'd go for is, again, that change of direction is super important. As long as you could, if someone asked you to pause given that change of direction, if you're going slow enough that if at the very bottom of the hack someone quickly said pause and you could pause it, fantastic, that's what we're after. But yeah, people get very strange ideas of bodybuilding reps. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to say, I remember now, was when we're kind of talking about like progression and what you said there, Camille, about like not just chucking on load, one question I'll often ask myself is like, if I feel really, really confident in something and I want to add on a bunch of load, I'll ask myself, I'll be like, okay, have I really had enough time for an adaptation to occur that's going to be like 20 kilos or something, right? Because the answer is probably no. Like the answer might be like, you're doing a leg press, you do like, 8 plates aside, and you're like, oh, it feels good, I'll do 9. I'll be like, well, it's been 7 days since I last did this leg press. Have I really a 40 kilo adaptation, like 90 pounds in there, like, nah, that's not what's gone on, And so often I'll go like, okay, I feel confident, like, let's be more sensible. And then you get something good out of it. And that's the thing is, if you end up progressing load too aggressively, you end up with all sorts of issues. You'll definitely piss something off. You might end up with a really low rep set, and then you get really frustrated, and then you get into that question of like, okay, I added 20% load, but then my reps halved. So like, is that progress? I don't know. And then you equally run into that issue of like, okay, well, yeah, I kind of got it for like, okay, I got a lot more load, slightly less reps, and it was also kind of shit. And then you go in next time, you do that leg press, and you're like, holy shit, my knees fucking kill. The thing about bodybuilding training is like, you're going to be there next week. Calm down. You'll still be there. Be patient. There's a great, I think it was John Jewett who said it, who was like, if you're going to be a good bodybuilder, you're going to get very fucking strong. Do not get in a rush to be strong. Like, do not have your strength lead ahead of your physique, because you're just going to run into issues. That should not be happening. Like, keep your strength where it needs to be to supply enough adaptation, enough stimulus, but do it to a degree that, is above and beyond. Yes, progress load. Yes, progress strength, but don't be trying to lift as heavily as humanly possible all the time on everything, because you will fuck something up, And I think there's a big difference between whenever people say like, I see people say like, oh, heavy set, and it's like heavy's relative. Like it's more about failure. Like you can do a set of 10, you can do a set of 15 on curls that's heavy because it's like your 15 rep max, so it feels heavy as fuck. So focus on that proximity to failure more than just overall load, because that's what matters most, is that proximity to failure.
Yeah, and people need to understand the repercussions of like doing heavier weights. Like if you can get to grow your chest from a lower weight compared to a higher weight, if you think about the repercussions of doing a higher weight, aka more joint irritation,
Yep.
a potential risk of injury to anything around the joint, you know, you could drop the dumbbell on your head, whatever. Increased like systemic fatigue, stimulus to fatigue ratio could be affected, stability demand. There are all these variables that come with lifting heavier load. It's like if you can get away with lifting a lighter load and getting the same stimulus as the heavier load, why wouldn't you do it? It just makes fucking sense. Like progressing your weight should be something that you do at a very slow scale, because you want to get the most out of every single weight. The same with like PDs, for example. It makes sense. It would be like saying like from someone who doesn't do any PDs to suddenly jump on like 750 or like a gram a test or something like that. It's just fucking stupid, because there's so much that you can get out of lower fucking doses, but you just jumped the gun and now you just look like a fucking felon. It's the exact same concept of weight. It's just, you could say the same thing with food, for example. It's like going from a bulk to a cut. We've now gone from, I don't know, like 2,500 calories to now 4,500. What's the fucking point? You're just going to gain a ridiculous amount of weight too quickly, and then you just wasted all this time you could have spent in a smaller surplus, getting more out of your lifts, still progressing at the same rate. It's like you can only build muscle at a specific value. So it's called your p-value, right? You can only build muscle at a specific amount per month, let's say. Anything above that is going to be just fat gain. So it's like, okay, yeah, we're gaining weight faster, but are we actually growing muscle at a faster rate? No. So what the fuck is the point of us gaining weight quicker? You know, like something that I've learned like with bodybuilding is fucking patience. Like patience is not one of my virtues. I'm not going to lie. I'm very impatient naturally, but bodybuilding does fucking teach you to be patient. You know, whether it's, you know, in your set specifically, be patient in the sense that, you know, if it starts getting heavy and uncomfortable, be patient. The set will end, but like milk, you know, the uncomfortableness, that's where you grow the most. You know, whether it's in a cut where it's like, you know, I'm fucking uncomfortable, I hate myself, but like, you know, it's going to end at some point. So see it through. Whether it's in a bulk, you know, you're going to be uncomfortable, you're going to be forcing food, you know, all of this, like be patient. Like at all phases in bodybuilding, you always have to be fucking patient. It is super, super important.
Yep. The hardest thing about bodybuilding is that balance between driving for more and getting ahead of yourself. Like people rush food beyond what they need. People rush PDs beyond what they need. People rush training stimulus beyond what they need. You know, people be like, oh, I need more volume, I need more load, I need more whatever. And they'll just, you know, like sack off whatever they were doing for the sake of pushing things up. Bodybuilding is very, very hard to do in terms of like managing things, because it's just keeping things at a perfect level of you are progressing, you are doing enough to progress, you are taking your body to a caloric surplus, you are taking your body to a progressive state in training, but not to a degree that's counterproductive. And that's where people struggle, is they just get caught up with more is more is more, and then they keep on adding it up. And that's where people run into issues, like you said, with PDs, food, training, whatever it is, because they are just there to rush progression as quickly as possible. People will be like, oh, you know, I'll get as heavy as possible, or I'm trying to bring up a body part, so I just abuse it with volume, or I'm trying to bring up a body part, just get it stupidly strong, or they'll call it stupidly strong, but like they're just trying to lift as much as possible. You know, you see people doing like hinges where they'll be like, I'm trying to bring up my glutes and my hamstrings, and their hinges just like completely lumbar rounded, like they're just pulling entirely from their erectors. There's like no tension on their posterior chain at all except for their erectors. And it's like, what is the point of you doing what you're doing? You are like, what you're saying you're doing and what you're actually doing are miles apart. But people will try and do that as aggressively as possible, chuck as much load on that bar, and then they might get away with it, but they're still not going to see the progress that they want. And people do the same thing with food. They'll be like, oh, I've been this body weight, even though it was shit, so I need to get heavier than that. You know, and that is the difficulty of bodybuilding, is perfectly balancing things, not rushing your way there, but equally you can't just sit still. You can't just lift the same. You can't just eat the same. You can't just do the same things. You have to progress it. But that progression is the difficult part, because it's that rate of progression that people struggle with.
I want to get your opinion on something. So,
oh yeah,
I recently was watching Cuba, as you do,
yeah.
Something that he does every single session is at the beginning of his session, he does like 2 sets of a plank. I think it was a minute.
Yeah.
And he discussed obviously the importance of stability and how you need to be bracing on every single exercise, not just the big compounds. You need to be bracing on everything in order to produce as much stability, so you can produce as much force, to produce as much stimulus, to grow as much muscle.
Yeah.
So I've been implementing that for a couple sessions, and you know, I'm not doing it for the hypertrophic benefit. I'm doing it for the neurological benefit of actually engaging my abs. So I get like a little bit of a pump in my abs, and I go into, for example, my press movement today. I felt so much more fucking stable. It could be a placebo effect, but you know, I've now contracted my abs, or done like an isometric contraction of my abs for, you know, total of 2 minutes, 120 seconds. So like neurologically, my CNS is like, cool, like this is warm, like we're contracting this, yes, like focus on this. Whereas if I hadn't done that, and I go into like a press, for example, I start arching my back, you know, I start creating that lordosis, which obviously stretches the abs. And in that case, when they're stretched, it's difficult to contract them in order to create that intra-abdominal pressure. This way, I go into my movement. So for example, like a press, where I'm still arching my back in a sense that I'm creating that extension in my T-spine, but not too much extension in my L spine, but I'm still able to brace my abs. And like, obviously, I want to get your opinion on it, what your thoughts are.
So with something like that, where you're improving your ability to brace through your midsection and somewhat through like your spine, it has, in terms of like application, there's going to be a bit of like placebo effect for some things, and there's going to be like direct carryover for others. The thing about stability is, as much as it does enhance a lift, you have to ask, where is the stability and what is the application of it? So for example, like if you're doing a seated machine fly, having a bit better core control isn't going to do much, right? Because there already isn't that demand axially at all. Whereas if you were doing like, even if you were doing like a standing cable fly, even with like on the Cybex Bravo with like the pad behind you, you could still make a good case for, okay, there's some kind of axial load there. So for something like that, it's not something that you need to implement. And I think, again, drawing the line somewhere can be hard, because for some people it is going to be a waste of time. Like, it's just not needed. A lot of the time, someone's ability to create stability just comes from time and just skill acquisition and just getting more familiar with those lifts. But there is also a benefit, like, to your proprioception and feeling more stable if you can generate that through there. So I think it's hard to give an answer on, because it's going to be a case by case basis. Like, for some people, they'd find it distracting. For some people, they might find that it actually takes them out of certain positions that they want to be in. For other people, they might find that it helps. For Kuba, clearly it's something that he enjoys. I do have a small grudge against it, because I see a lot of coaches putting all of their clients on it all the time. And that to me screams like, it's not great. It kind of screams like when physios used to, when physios used to scream about correct posture, and it's like it kind of screams like, oh, you need to, you're not going to be able to do this, so you need to be able to do this before you're set. And it's like, well, not everyone needs to get into the same position. Not everyone's going to benefit from being in the same position. Not everyone struggles to get into the same position. So it's not something that I think everyone needs, but it's one of those things where, if you have a coach, ask them about it. If this is for the viewers at home, if you don't have a coach, I would play around with it, see how you feel, and go from there. For me, speaking from personal experience, like doing abdominal work on like warm-ups, like I used to do it for pulling movements, does fuck all for me. Like a lot of people, like praise oblique work before lat work, because the ability to like stack their rib cage and really kind of target their lats makes sense. For me, there's fucking nothing. I don't have any issue training my lats. If I train my obliques too much, I just get a bit of an oblique pump during my lats, and it's very distracting. Same thing with like abs. I find helps me on hinging, but only hinging. Pressing and squatting does fucking nothing. It does help a little bit with rowing, but not really with pressing. But again, it just comes down to like, I'm sure if you looked at my footage, you could break it down and be like, naturally, you can get into this position. You find this position more comfortable, yada, 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 because it can take you or put you into certain positions. So if you notice a benefit, run it up. There's no reason not to, but it's not something that I would apply to absolutely everything, if that makes sense.
It's interesting because like this is the conundrum you get to when you have a general good understanding of not just bodybuilding but any topic, and you actually just like there is no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
It's like you said, a case by case basis, and I think that is so fucking important. If you're doing it for all your clients, fuck that. You're doing it for the wrong reasons. It's like, you know, saying about the correct posture. Like recently, my dad got a disc bulge just from like sleeping, which is fact. But the doctors were like, oh, like you're not going to be able to move. Your spine needs to be as stiff as possible. I was like, are you actually fucking like mentally retarded?
Yeah, no.
You're telling my dad, like, who's had a stiff spine for about 20 years, that his spine needs to be even more stiff because he's got a disc bulge. And it's like going into that fear avoidant language and telling them you can't do this, or you can't, you know, you can't bend over and lift a thing with your spine bent. That's what caused the problems in the first place, because people are so scared to do it. They don't train the spine in a flexion range of motion, so that when they do a flexion range of motion, when they haven't braced, they get this bulge, because that's what causes this bulge is spinal flexion under load. You know, you got it from sleeping. That's how fucking weak those intraspinous muscles are. If you fucking rolled over, it's probably like sleeping in the curled up position. His spine was in flexion and something just went like. But like it's so important to keep an open mind with everything. And this is like, you know, I'd say I'm relatively educated, and you know what might work for me. I have my own opinion, right? But I always like to ask other people, you know, Jack, you know, other coaches, you know, my mates. I always ask for everyone's opinion, and it's a win-win basis, right? Because either they disprove you and you come out and now you know more, and you know their theory is now actually backed up by reason, or it reinforces what you believe because someone else challenged your opinion and they deemed that your opinion was more feasible, right? So it's a win-win situation. It's for people that are trying to develop their knowledge, you know, their intelligence, stuff like that. Always fucking keep an open mind. You can't be like stubborn and like so set in stone on one ideology, because there is no right or wrong answer in majority of things in life. I feel like a life coach now on a fucking bodybuilding podcast, but there we go.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like the more knowledgeable you become, like you kind of there's those different states of knowledge. I forget, fucking Luke was telling me about them. But you can get to a point where like you're pretty new to something, you don't know a ton, so you can't really just go wrong. Like you just learn a little bit and you'll be fine. Like learn a little bit, implement it, you'll be sweet. You get to a point where you've got a good amount of knowledge about things, but you're not super knowledgeable. And then you start to implement things that either don't have application or they're not quite like fully backed by what makes sense. And that's where, you know, you get into like, people can get into dangerous territory because they do things that doesn't quite make sense, but they think that it does because they kind of grasp the concept, but not really. And I think a lot of coaches nowadays are stuck in that middle ground. And this is where like Camille right there wasn't like, oh, I train my abs and then I press and it kind of magically feels better. Like he was talking about, for me, it helps me position particular segments of my spine when I press, which for me helps me drive more stability without really taking away from his ability to fully, you know, keep those scaps in an appropriate position that allows him to reach full depth, to still train his chest ahead of his delts, and put his shoulder in a position that's powerful yet pain-free, etc., etc. Right. And that's where, because Camille has a good understanding of anatomy, he's able to apply these things and he's able to look at that and go, cool. He's not going to look at, you know, planking or side planks and then be like, yeah, for a dumbbell curl, that's going to be fucking sick. Yeah, for a seated calf raise, it's going to be fucking sick. Like, there's just no application. But having that understanding of like, okay, it creates stability through these particular areas in exercises where I am requiring stability through these particular areas. It makes benefit for me to maybe warm up those things. And it might get to the point where in a few weeks' time, he doesn't need that warm up anytime. But I think, again, like whenever you see someone just blanket implement something, it's like, okay, but where did you draw that conclusion from? Do you know what I mean? Like, has that coach actually looked at that person's pressing or squatting or hinging or whatever it is and said, yes, you need abdominal work before going into this? Or did they just give them abdominal work? You know, was there any need at all for it? And that's where I think, again, a lot of coaches just go, oh yeah, but it's good for your bracing. And then you go, how? And they're like, and like, you shouldn't really be in that position. You should be able to break it down and understand case by case basis. And this is where arguments about training come from. It's just a misunderstanding, because people don't quite understand that, like, here's the application of when you would use it, here's the application of when you wouldn't. They just go, oh, it's shit, or it's good. And as soon as I hear that, I'm like, okay, because you shouldn't really have that strong of an opinion on something, because there's always, you can always think of at least one human being where, okay, and maybe that's a bit niche, but it still makes sense for that person. You know, like I always say, training and kind of things that you learn, they're like top trump cards. They got things they're good at, things they're shit at. You're not going to necessarily say they're all good or they're all bad. It's kind of like a guy who owns a sports car being like, getting a fucking 4x4 is a waste of time. You know, like, tell that to the farmer. Like, tell it to the guy that lives in the countryside. Do you know what I mean? Or like, it's a guy with like a tiny little electric car being like, why would you want something any bigger? And like, say that to the mum of fucking 6. But all of those cars have a place, right? People have personal preferences, but they all have a place. Same with training. Like, all of these ideas have a place. There are people who are going to fucking benefit from doing abdominal work before a particular movement pattern. Also, people that are just pissing in the ocean. They're doing absolutely nothing. You know, I'm sure you can find people with like absolutely fantastic ribcage and spine control, and they just, you know, they're just pissing in the wind. They're just doing absolutely fucking nothing. Like, if you had an ex-gymnast come to you and you were like, yeah, how's your spinal mobility? And they're like, fucking great. You'd be like, well, yeah, we're maybe not going to need to challenge that much, or we're maybe not going to need to focus on that. But if you've got someone who's been sat bolt right up in a chair, like scaps elevated for like 30 years, you know, then you might need to work on a little bit of mobility for that person. But
looks like you, mate.
But it depends. But obviously it depends like on the person in front of you. One more thing I'll say, and then I'll let fucking Camille talk, is not enough coaches do needs analysis based on movements, as in like getting clients doing movement drills. So one thing that I'll often do, particularly more advanced clients, is I'll get them to send over videos of them performing certain movements. So it might be shoulder flexion, it might be scapular protraction or retraction, just like kind of either shirtless or just is like in clothing that's like fairly tight, so you can kind of see what's going on there, and just get them to perform it and see how it goes. Even small things like, okay, pretend you're doing a lateral raise, face away from the camera and show me your back, and just watching how their scaps kind of move and work together for something, or press or row, etc. Or even basic stuff like seeing what their squat mobility is like, just free weight or just freestanding, sorry, just with their body weight. All of those things give you a really fucking good idea of how to sequence exercises, where to place it. People go, oh, should I squat first or second? It's like, okay, well, show me your squat first. Like, should I do it at the end? Should I do it at the start? Okay, show me your legs, show me your squat, because that's going to tell me like 90% of that fucking question. You know, how strong are you? How advanced are you? But again, I can kind of tell from how well you move in that position and how fucking big your legs are. If you come to me with like huge quads and you've got a kind of shit ability to get into that position, I might go, okay, well, we're probably going to do it last, where you're mostly warmed up. It's also not going to generate a shit ton of fatigue, etc., etc. Might also not make sense to, based on whatever that person said, but getting a look at someone's muscularity, their structure, maybe their femur length relative to their torso, etc., and looking at how they perform that is vital. Anyone who's been coached by us knows how often we'll be like, you know, send me a video of this with no weight, or send me a video of you doing this, or meeting up in person and just being like, let me have a fucking like poke around in your scap while you do that, or just like taking a second to stand back and be like, you know, like fucking taking a picture, you're like trying to look at the client like, oh, well, fucking, how's that moving? But yeah, being able to assess and read someone's anatomy, I guess it's reading anatomy, is so fucking important.
Yeah, we call it AROM, or active range of motion. I send it to anyone that's been injured, but also clients who are struggling with specific movements. Like I've got like videos I found on YouTube of
Yep.
like being like, okay, active range of motion of the hip, you know, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. But then people are like, what, internal, external rotation of the hip? I'm like, yeah, your hip can rotate, mate. It's like, yeah, let's see your internal rotation. Let's see that fucking glute med, mate.
Yes.
But like a thing that I wanted to touch on earlier is like I saw a post on Instagram that really, really, really got me going, and it was someone talking about like a tier list for exercises, and they put barbell row in D tier, and like I left a really, really long and angry comment. Um, something that I talk about on my story quite a lot is like your how good an exercise is isn't dictated by the exercise itself, but by the person doing it and what you're doing it for.
Yep.
So, like for example, like for barbell rows, if you're doing it to grow your erectors, fucking fantastic, mint. If you're doing it to grow your back, okay, can be a little bit more difficult in order to produce the same stimulus that you might do on like a chest supported prime row, but it doesn't mean you can't do it, and you can still emphasize that by the person doing the exercise.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like people fail to like exercise selection doesn't matter anywhere near as much as people make it out to seem. But it's like I need to be pressing in the most like clavicular plane, or I need to emphasize the lat with the best fucking arm path or some shit. Like, no, mate, like you can fucking focus on like the basic principles of, you know, intensity, pausing in the lengthened, a good contraction, forceful contraction, like we said, like the basic principles. You know, training is a skill, and that skill applies to all fucking exercises. There's a certain level of applicability that you can take once you learn how to train, and you apply it to every single exercise. When I do a new exercise now, do you think I start from the beginning by just fucking flinging it around, not doing not fucking hell, not doing what I know what to do, right? It's like, you know, I tried a dumbbell skull crusher for the first time the other day, and like the first set, I was already, you know, pausing in a lengthen, taking my time, getting a good stretch and a good contraction. And it's like, you know, it's the first time I did that exercise, but that I still got shit ton of fucking stimulus from it. Why? Because I know how to train. That's applicable to everything. But yeah, another thing that I wanted to say is like, your scaps are so fucking underlooked, and it pisses me off. It's like a lot of people will do rehab and they'll focus on the shoulder or even the T-spine, or, you know, the neck, because there's a lot of regional interdependence between the neck and the shoulder, but they won't look at the scaps. Like your scaps, for some reason, I can't tell you exactly why, but your scaps are so fucking problematic. It's like a lot of people that I coach, including myself, I have scap problems too, have scap issues. And it's like, if you don't do an assessment of their scapula, how it's moving, how will you know? If you're not training the eye, like me and Jack are, for example, how will you know if their scap is moving properly into depression and retraction when they're pressing, or if their scap is able to elevate properly in order to do a lat spread, like stuff like that? Like if you're not training the eye, you will not know. So do an active assessment of how it's moving in protraction and retraction and elevation and depression, and that will tell you everything. A little key for you guys at home to what muscles to look at. So lower trapezius, super fucking important in scapular depression specifically. And a lot of people have an issue with either engaging or an imbalance in strength between the lower traps. Another one is serratus anterior. So serratus anterior, you know, the fucking gill muscle is super important for retraction, but also protraction because it stabilizes protraction. So that's something really important to look at. It does get trained in terms of stability from pressing, but some people, if they can't engage the scapula properly, they press like this, where they lose all that tension in that upper back, and that's not good for your serratus anterior. So those are two muscles that I would say to really focus on. But obviously, you know, having an understanding of all musculature, they can impact. Lats is another important one, not in the scapula specifically, but for shoulder health. Like people underestimate how big of a muscle your lat is. And like the where it attaches onto your shoulder, it is really, 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 really important for shoulder stability. And I made a post the other day where it was like, I think I said like your shoulder positioning when you're pressing, and I said like tucking into your lat and then pressing in a more abducted position. That doesn't mean you're not tucking in your lat, right? that was something that I had a little pet peeve about what I said. I was waffling, but like when you're pressing a more abducted position, that doesn't mean your lat is engaged. That just means you're pressing a more abducted position. Your lat should be engaged when you're pressing, because what it does is when your lat's engaged, it pushes the glenohumeral joint down and allows the roll and slide into the fucking the shoulder complex or the labrum. If it's not engaged, that roll and slide. So if we imagine this is the humerus and this is the labrum, if it's not engaged, that roll and slide isn't going to be working properly, right? So if it's engaged and it's pulling the humerus down, it allows for a space between the labrum and the humerus in order for that movement to be more efficient and less painful, basically. A lot of people get pain when articular surfaces run across each other. For example, in your AC joint, in your GH joint. It's basically when two surfaces are too close together, so they rub across each other. That's why we want to create space, whether it's in the GH, the AC, in a spine. If your discs are too close together, for example, that's what causes the pain. So if we create traction, we can alleviate some of your symptoms and have more pain-free and safe movement. I'm sorry, I've been waffling for like 10 minutes. Jack, go on.
No, you're chill, man. You're chill. Yeah, I think there's too much neglect in bodybuilding about certain musculature, certain joints, and certain movement patterns, or certain joint actions. Like people always go, "Oh yeah, you're training muscles, not joints," and it's like, what do you think muscles do? They move joints, and like the last time I checked, for you to press or curl, you do in fact have to move your joints. And I think, yeah, people just kind of, whether it's through want of like simplification of bodybuilding or I don't know, just plain ignorance or whatever, people pull together plans really fucking easily. I mean, the worst one is like coaches who would just kind of coach themselves, and then they're just like, yeah, fuck it, I'm a coach now. No qualification, no backing, anything. And they're just like putting together plans, and they're like, oh, what? A push day? Yeah, fucking some chest, some delts, some triceps. Okay, bro. And it's like, you didn't look at that client's needs. How did you decide to give them a push day? Why push? Why not pushing arms? Why not pushing back? Why not pushing some legs? Why not throw some quads in there? You know, why not abs? Oh, because it's not a push day, bro. Okay, then why push? Again, why that many sets? Why those exercises? How are you picking intensity? How are you picking rep ranges? How are you picking rest periods? How are you picking tempo? How are you picking those specific exercises for that person? We're going to do a flat press then an incline press. Okay, but why? Oh, because they need to grow their chest. Okay, cool. Have you assessed their ability to actually grow their chest? Have you looked at what they've done previously? Have you assessed their ability to get into those positions that you're asking them? Because if you're asking them to get into really extreme positions and they can't, well, then you've already got a plan which is failing. If you're asking them to, if you're trying to get someone to grow their whole pec, and you could just give full incline work, that's fine. You don't need to train, so you don't need to particularly bias those costal fibers or bias away from those clavicular fibers. Again, if you're just going to absolutely spam volume at someone hoping that they grow, what the fuck is the point? Why are you doing that? Again, I think there's too many people who take bodybuilding, and people be like, oh, bodybuilding's simple. And it's like, yeah, in theory, it's simple until something goes wrong, or it's simple until you get someone who isn't in perfect condition. Like, it's simple until you've got someone who needs a bit more help aligning something, because if not, they get a bit of pain. But this is what happens when people get more advanced. Like when I first joined the gym, I was just like, yeah, just train and eat, bro. And it was fine. It worked. Then it got to the point where I was like, oh shit, actually, I have digestive issues. Oh shit, actually, I have tendon issues. Like, I wasn't strong enough to cause myself tendon issues. Now I am. Now I have to be careful. Like, I wasn't strong enough for alignment to even be a concern. Now it is. Like, I wasn't strong enough to accidentally hypertrophy the wrong tissue. Like, it just didn't happen. But now I have to be cautious of that. You know, my food wasn't high enough to warrant like digestive concerns and like health concerns. These are things that you have to think about long term. And the thing is, if you're a coach who relies on not being able to do those things, your days are fucking numbered. Like, imagine a client turns around to you and says, hey, I got this pain, and you're like, damn, that's crazy. Like, what? Like, and then that's when that client leaves, and then you're fucked, and then people like you end up with that client. And like, you know, shit, that happens. That shit happens. Like, I've had people, I've had coaches turn around and be like, hey, this client is leaving because he's injured. And I'll be like, go and take them to Camille. You get access to Camille as well. You know, or like people, I had one guy who signed up who was like, oh, I'm quite prone to injury. So obviously if I get injured, I'll have to quit the coaching. And I was like, brother, one, you're not going to get injured. Two, if you do, I've got a rehab guy. You'll be fine. Like, that's the thing, is like when you've got that covered, like you're fine. It's like the same way that I'm not concerned about my clients developing like cardiovascular disease or metabolic disease or kind of any kind of like thyroid issues or insulin insensitivity or hypertension. Like I'm not worried about those things because I can stop them from happening for my clients. You know, I'm not concerned about people's eating habits because I track them and I help them and I monitor them. You know, like that's the thing, is when you are a good coach, you don't need to concern yourself with this. Like if someone turns up to me and says like, hey, I have thyroid down regulation, I'm like, bro, got you got bloods? No, fine. Like, yeah, I still got you. You know, but if you're there just waiting for someone to like show up, I think coaches, right, I'll finish on this and all that kind of
just going back to back.
we're both
now.
just just fucking
yeah, serious yappers, mate.
Band for band, bro. But coaches sit there and they wait for the perfect client. And like you know, I've had conversation with coaches where they'll be like, oh, I just want to work with people who are more serious. You know, I just want to work with people who are more serious. First of all, crazy, bro. I wanted to work with people who are less serious. I wanted to work with people who pie me off. Like, what a unique thing to say. That's crazy. Like, but all coaches want to work with someone more serious. Do you get what I mean? Like, it's like me saying, oh, I don't want my clothing to be successful. You know, BNB, I've got quite a unique goal with BNB. It's to sell a lot of clothing. Quite a unique goal there. Like, yeah, my goal as a coach is to work with people who are going to fucking listen to me. Crazy goal, bro. Very. But anyway, like that always bores my piss. Like, I'll be like, that's crazy that you think there's people who just like don't want that. Everyone wants to work with people who engage with them, first of all. So anyway, rant aside. The next thing is, it's like, okay, you want to work with more advanced people, but then as soon as someone who comes to you who isn't just like perfectly fine and functioning, like as soon as they come to you, you have to fuck them off. And like that is advanced people. Like advanced people have wear and tear. They have issues. They have concerns. Like, you know, you work with someone advanced, they're going to be like, hey, I've got personal preferences. Hey, I've got this, that, the other going on. My old coach didn't used to do this. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Because they care. They give a shit. You know, they're going to be like, oh, I've got this going on and I've got this going on. And then I've also got like a fucking several different issues. Like if I go to a coach now, I'm going to have to be like, hey, I've really shit digestion. I've got really shit tendonitis. I'm starting to prep this year. Fucking sort me out. And it's like, I'm a good fucking client, but a lot of coaches are not going to be able to have me because they'll be like, I don't know where to start, bro. And that's the issue, is like when you can't deal with that client, you are absolutely fucked. Your coaching is a huge hole in it. And a lot of people hear that and they go, oh yeah, but I work with lifestyle clients. Lifestyle clients even worse, bro. Lifestyle clients will be like, I had a fucking heart attack 3 weeks ago and the GP said I need to join the gym. What should I eat? And you're like, I have to tell a fucking heart attack survivor what to eat. Oh my God. It's Linda, who's not got a hip. This guy's fucking got nerve neck from staring at Fortnite all day, and he's complaining of fucking, you know, like I've got someone here whose mum cooks all his food and I'm trying to grow his biceps. What the fuck do I do there? This guy's got a family history of hypertension and he's also trying to blow his quads up. What the fuck do I do? And like, that's the issue. Oh, and this guy, he's manual labor, he works on his feet, he's got forearm tendonitis from his fucking job. Like, that's the thing, is you're going to run into people who have wear and tear, like no matter who you're thinking, who you want to work with. Too many coaches want to work with someone who's got elite genetics, will do everything they say, has no issues and will never have any issues, and is willing to pay out a fucking ass for mid-coaching. It's not going to happen. You're not going to meet someone who goes, yeah, by the way, my budget is like $5,000 a month. I'm willing to pay double that, actually. I'll take out a loan, it's fine. I'm guaranteed to be an IFBB pro and I don't need to take drugs, so don't worry about that. Just give me protein and calories and I'll grow like a fucking weed and I'll never get injured. I'll just get infinitely strong and my pictures will look better and better. Like, who are you thinking you're going to coach? Because it's not going to be that guy. That guy does not fucking exist. Even within like high level competitors, you've got people who are dealing with shit. So fucking be a better coach, basically.
I can think of so many specific instances where like injury knowledge and prevention and, you know, rehab stuff like that becomes even more apparent. The one main one I can think of right now is I was explaining to my client today. He asked me, he was like, so why do we do quad extensions before doing a pendulum? Why am I doing pendulum last in the session?
Yes.
I was like, okay, sit down, buddy. Here we go. I was like, I gave him the generic, like, okay, you know, we pre-exhaust that. So, you know, quad extensions targeting more in the shortened range. Obviously, the longer we go for a session and the more pumped the muscle is specifically, the harder it is to get in the short range. So it makes sense in order to do a shortened bias exercise first and then the lengthened bias. The same when we do like a line hamstring count and then an RDL. Then I said it goes a little bit more deeper than that because that's one reason. But the second reason is as you get stronger, your injury risk, goes up exponentially the more load that you do, especially on legs, right? Leg training you can do significantly, or majority of people, again, I'm not going to generalize, but majority of people can do a significantly higher amount of weight on legs than their shoulders or, any other muscle group, right?
Yeah.
That means injury risk is ever more fucking prevalent, right? And I know how debilitating it is to have a gammy knee. I've seen it. It's fucking jarring, yeah? Or a hip, by the amount of things, or ankles, just lower limb, like upper limb. If you got a gammy elbow or a shoulder, yeah, it's jarring. But if your leg's fucked, you cannot walk without being in pain. It's long, So I told him, I was like, once you start upping the weight, you might not have problems now, yeah. But if you start upping the weight, if we can drop your pendulum from 6 plates to 4 plates and still get the same amount of stimulus because we pre-exhausted, we should fucking do that. And it applies to certain clients with pressure movements. If I know you're prone to getting a fucking shoulder injury, I'm more inclined to pre-exhaust. Let's do a pec deck first, so you don't have to be pressing 50s on incline. If I can get you from pressing 50s to pressing 40s or 42s with the same stimulus, but we're doing less weight, then I'm all fucking for it. Because in hindsight, it's not just your muscle getting fucking trained. It's your tendon as well. It's your ligaments. It's your joint capsule. It's everything else in between. Like Jack said, you're not training the muscle. You're training the fucking joint. Understand there's so much, like even fascia. I could be an absolute neek and talk about how the fascial connection, how we're not really training muscles, we're training fascia. Yeah, cool. But the point is, we're not just training muscle, we're training the body, right?
Understanding training muscles is so fucking easy. It's like, just think about what muscles involved in what. Like, that's the easy shit. Like, it's the rest of what you're training that you need to think about. It's thinking about your joints, your anatomy, like, where is that not just the movement that you're doing, but the resistance profile. Where's that challenge being presented? Where does it exaggerate? Where does it die off, etc., etc.? Sorry, go on, mate.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's like, injury prevention, like, yeah, you could say it's fucking marketing, whatever, because you're the injury specialist, but like, it is so fucking important. Like, genuinely, at every single phase that a client is in, right? If a client is in prep, like, it's a fucking priority to not get them injured.
Yeah.
If they get injured, they might not even step on stage. We've got lifestyle clients, like you said, you've got fucking hyperthyroidism, you've got, Paget's disease, like osteoporosis, bruv. She's missing a fucking hip, mate. Margaret's cooked. Like, how are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle it if you don't have the necessary knowledge in order to do so? And it goes so much more than actual rehab and musculoskeletal disorders. Like Jack said, metabolic disease, fucking cardiovascular, respiratory, gastrointestinal. Like, it's so basic though. Like, if your client has like heartburn or indigestion or something like that, you need to have the necessary steps in order to help them. Because who else will? Like, GPs are so shit at the moment. Like, have you tried to get a GP appointment? It's so long. And you'll fucking go to them and they'll be like, oh yeah, just take some omeprazole, mate. Like, fuck off. You haven't fucking helped me, have you? Just giving me medications in order to help with my acid reflux. But like, you haven't told me why I've got it or what do I do in the future in order to prevent it. What, am I just going to take omeprazole for the rest of my life then? Fuck off. Like, yeah, you see what I'm trying to say though? It's like, it's in your remit as coaches become more and more fucking knowledgeable, thanks to things like the academy, to know these things, because you're just going to be left in the dust. It's like, it's become a thing where it's like a tick box. Like, you need to know this because everyone else does. As coaching becomes more saturated, right? More people become coaches every single year because it's such like I wouldn't say like a high demand of jobs, but like people look up to coaches like, I want to do that. I want to have that as my job. So the level of knowledge or the standard goes up every single year. And if you're not doing anything in order to invest in your knowledge to keep up with the standard will go up. You'll remain here. So you'll be under par. So people will naturally, over time, statistically leave you because you're under the standard, and they'll find another coach who reaches out to them and helps them with a problem, rizzes them up, and fucking steals them from you. It's as simple as that. Like, if you want to not lose your clients, you need to become a better coach. Oh.
And on that fucking bombshell, boys, that's Growers Not Showers. We never say the name of the pod. It's Growers Not Showers.
Growers not fucking shows.
We're gonna have to rename ourselves when we both get on stage. I mean, well, what the academy has 2 clients getting on stage.
Showers, not growers.
We'll be we'll be growers and showers pretty soon. Anyway, as always, thanks everyone for listening. Going to get coached by Camille. He is Camille_Archer Academy, coached by me, Jack_Archer Academy. If you want coaching education from either one of us, it's the same instas. Head over there. This is available on YouTube and Spotify. Give it a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're after some new garms in the gym, I also own a clothing company, BuiltNotBorn.Store. You can use code Camille10. It helps out Camille and it helps out me. That also gets you 10% off. Anything else you want to end up on, mate? Any like words of wisdom to kind of like round out their day? You know, maybe they can like reflect on it when they go into bed, maybe like meditate on it, maybe like have it replay in their head over and over.
Train smart and train hard. Don't pick one or the other. Do both. Peace.